Colonel ordered her off base. A black chopper landed carrying her command authorization, "Get off my base, sweetheart, before I have you escorted off in handcuffs." The words cut through the morning air at Fort Bragg like a blade scraping metal, clean and deliberate, designed to carry. Colonel Richard Harmon did not lower his voice. He never lowered his voice. That was the point. 43 personnel on the parade ground that Tuesday morning, instructors with clipboards, maintenance crew who had stopped mid-task. A line of Special Forces candidates frozen in formation. Every one of them heard it. He intended every one of them to hear it. The woman he said it to did not look up. She was 31 years old, 5'4", slight build, regulation haircut pinned into a clean bun at the back of her neck. Plain EQ blouse, no rank insignia of any kind, a contractor's identification badge clipped at her collar. Her hands were working on a disassembled M110 sniper rifle spread across a portable field table outside the armory entrance. She had arrived at 0430 that morning, before the duty officer had coffee, before the base had remembered it was awake. She had requisitioned the table herself, set up her equipment, and began work without explaining herself to anyone. That had been the first problem. The second problem was that she was very, very good at what she was doing, and Colonel Richard Harmon had decided that was his third problem. The sun was still low. It threw long shadows across the parade ground. When Harmon stepped closer, his shadow fell across her workspace, deliberate, slow, the physical grammar of a man who used his body the way other men used orders. She controlled her breathing. 4 in, hold 4, 4 out, hold 4. Her hands did not pause. "I'm talking to you." His voice dropped lower, theatrical, the way a man's voice drops when he has an audience and knows it. "I heard you, sir." She picked up the bolt carrier group and rotated it with both hands. The angle of her wrists was precise, practiced, the kind of practice that doesn't come from a manual. "Then look at me when I address you." She set the component down. She looked at him. Her expression did not change. "There you go." He smiled at the men behind him, 6 Special Forces instructors, 2 of them already grinning at each other. "Now, who authorized you to handle weapon systems on my installation?" "Requisition authorization is on file with your armory sergeant, sir. Requisition authorization." He repeated it the way a professor repeats a wrong answer. "And who signed it?" "Above my pay grade to say, sir." The smile stayed, but something shifted behind it. "Above your pay grade." He looked at the men. The men looked at him. Someone in the formation behind him snorted. "No rank on that blouse, honey, no unit patch. Just a lanyard and a smile. So let me ask you a direct question. What exactly is it you think you're doing here?" "Field maintenance assessment, sir." "On whose authority?" "I was told you'd have been notified." "I was not notified." "Then there's been a communication failure above both our pay grades, sir." The smile disappeared. From the doorway of the armory building, 40 feet away, Master Sergeant Leonard Briggs stood with his coffee and watched. He was 61 years old, 9 months from retirement, 33 years of service compressed into a frame that still filled a doorway. He had been in this army long enough to see everything twice and stop being surprised by most of it. He watched the woman pick the bolt carrier group back up. He watched her hands. He had trained Special Forces candidates for 11 years. He had seen thousands of people handle that rifle. The way she rotated that component, the angle, the pressure, the deliberateness. He had only ever seen that particular grip at one school, a school that most people who worked on this base had never heard of. His coffee cup lowered very slowly. His jaw tightened. He did not look away from her hands. By 0800, The story had a life of its own. The mess hall version, which reached the senior NCO table before breakfast was cleared, had her arguing with Harmon, telling him off, getting loud. That was not what happened, and everyone who had been there knew it. What actually happened was quieter, and therefore more unsettling. She had said 5 sentences. None of them were emotional. She had gone back to the rifle. He had stood there for 11 seconds. Sergeant Kowalski from the formation had counted, quietly, to himself. And then Harmon had turned and walked back toward the headquarters building with his shoulders set in a way that meant the next 2 hours were going to be difficult for everyone in his chain. She had watched him go. Then, she had gone back to the rifle. The contractor ID, someone in the group chat confirmed by 0830, did not pull up a name in the installation's personnel management system. That was technically possible. Classified contractors sometimes worked that way. The clearance check mechanism acknowledged the badge was valid, but provided no additional information. The additional information was, the system indicated, above the user's access level. Someone flagged this to Harmon. Harmon had responded with 3 words. Find out who. His J2 had tried. His J2 had hit a wall at the 3rd clearance tier, a wall that did not say access denied but instead said contact oversight authority, and then provided a phone number that, when dialed, connected to a recording that asked for a code word. His J2 did not have the code word. His J2 had not reported this to Harmon. He would explain, later, that he had not wanted to admit he had hit a wall. That decision would also be in his file. By 0900, she was sitting alone in the far corner of the mess hall with a cafeteria tray. Coffee. Black. No sugar. A meal that tasted like institutional efficiency. Reconstituted eggs. Toast that had been warmed 20 minutes ago. Orange juice from a carton. She ate without any expression of opinion about the food. Her right hand moved from the tray to a folded piece of paper on the table beside it and back again. She read the paper. She folded it again. She looked at the room. The way she looked at the room was not what it appeared to be. She was cataloging. Who sat with whom during the first 10 minutes? The inner circles, the established hierarchies, who sat with whom after the group had loosened, the cross-functional relationships, the ones that didn't appear on any org chart. Where the loud conversations happened, because loud conversations are almost never the real ones. Where the quiet conversations happened, near the windows, in the corners, the ones where faces leaned in and voices dropped. She was mapping the actual power structure of this installation in real time while appearing to eat reconstituted eggs alone. She had done this in 4 countries with considerably higher stakes than a Fort Bragg mess hall. Harmon entered at 0923. She watched him in her peripheral vision without turning her head. He moved through the room with the bearing of a man who expected it to recalibrate around him. And it did. Conversations shifted, postures adjusted. 3 officers straightened almost imperceptibly, the kind of authority that doesn't need to announce itself because the room has already remembered. He picked up coffee, spoke to 2 senior NCOs for approximately 90 seconds, and left. She noted who he spoke to, how long, and whether either man's posture changed after he walked away. It did. The kind of change that meant the conversation had not been social. She filed it. She folded her paper again. She finished her coffee. At 0946, she was back at the Armory field table with a disassembled M110 in front of her and the authentication terminal beside it. The authentication code for that system rotated on a 30-day cycle. It was classified. Most operators spent 4 to 5 minutes running the sequence from memory. She ran it in 9 seconds. Her fingers did not hesitate. The terminal accepted the code, and she moved directly to the next assessment task, without acknowledging that she had done anything unusual. From the armory doorway, Briggs was watching. His pen had stopped moving again. He had a report half completed in his hand, and the pen was not moving. The grip she had used on the bolt carrier group, that was one thing. The authentication code was another. You did not run that sequence in 9 seconds, unless you had used that specific system in operational conditions under time pressure. Not in a classroom. Not in a training environment. In the field, with consequences attached. He was building a picture, and the picture was making him careful about everything he did next. He went back inside. He picked up his phone. He set it down. He picked it up again. The mess hall had laughed at her, in its way, by noon. Not maliciously. The way people laugh at something they've decided is not worth their serious attention. The contractor lady who talked back to Harmon. That was how they referred to her in the group chats. Someone had made the joke about the coffee girl. She should have offered to make him a cup instead, and it had gotten 12 reactions, mostly laughing emojis, before it was buried under other messages. She was an anecdote by lunchtime. A small story that had already been assigned its meaning by the people who hadn't actually been there. Briggs did not think she was a small story. He thought about what he had seen and added it up very carefully and arrived at a number that concerned him considerably. Harmon came back at 10:53 with Captain Delgado and 2 MPs. "I'm initiating a credential review," he announced, loud enough for the armory area to hear. "Under AR 380-67. You'll come with us." She set down the component she was holding. She looked at Delgado. "Am I being detained, sir, or is this voluntary cooperation?" Delgado blinked. Harmon answered for him. "You're being escorted for credential verification. That's standard procedure. I understand." She began calmly reassembling the rifle in the correct sequence. "I'll need 40 seconds. You'll come now." "I'll need 40 seconds, sir." She did not raise her voice. "Protocol requires that any weapon system I've accessed during assessment be returned to safe condition before I leave the area. That's also standard procedure." She said the last 3 words without emphasis. Just stated them. The way a person states gravity. Harmon stared at her. She finished the reassembly in 37 seconds. She stood. She smoothed her blouse. She walked ahead of the MPs without being told to. From the armory doorway, Briggs watched her walk. Something about the way she moved. Not her pace. Her pace was unhurried, military precise. It was what her hands did when she wasn't using them. They stayed in a particular ready position at her sides, not quite relaxed. Not quite tense. The kind of posture that gets trained into a person under specific conditions. Specific, classified, very serious conditions. Briggs had not seen that posture in 12 years. The last person he'd seen carry their hands like that had been a name on a citation that later got classified. He set his coffee down very carefully. He went inside and made a phone call. The interrogation room was not theatrical. That was the honest word for it. It was not designed for drama. 12 by 12 feet of cinder block, one overhead fluorescent that hummed slightly off-key, a metal table bolted to the floor, 2 plastic chairs. It smelled of industrial cleaner over something older that the cleaner had never quite reached. A window near the ceiling showed a rectangle of pale morning sky. Nothing else. She sat with both hands on the table. Her breathing was even. 4 in, hold 4. 4 out, hold 4. She had done this in smaller rooms with less air and a great deal more at stake. Her watch read 11:34. Harmon stood across the table with a folder. He opened it with the confidence of a man who had never been wrong in front of a subordinate, and had no reason to expect today to be different. This badge clears for visitor access, Class C, General Contractor. It does not authorize you to handle classified weapon systems. It does not authorize you to conduct field assessments without a liaison officer present. It does not authorize independent access to this installation's armory records. He set the folder down and placed his hand flat on top of it. What it does authorize you to do is be escorted off this base, which is exactly what's going to happen. You're welcome to make that determination, sir. I already have. I understand. Her voice was calm. Level. The way very still water is level. You should know that I was due to check in with my supervision at 1100. I did not make that call. He stared at her. When I miss a scheduled check-in, a protocol activates automatically. She glanced at her watch. That protocol began activating 34 minutes ago. In approximately 19 minutes, a secondary notification goes to a second-tier office. In 51 minutes, a tertiary escalation notifies an oversight body you'd recognize the name of. She looked at him. Her expression did not change. I want to make sure you have accurate information about the timeline before you make your determination, sir. Protocols. He said the word, the way he'd said requisition authorization. From some classified contractor office nobody here has heard of. From an office that has clearance well above this installation, sir. Yes, take her credentials, he said to Delgado. Delgado took her badge. He took the lanyard. He held them in his hands. She watched him do it and said nothing. Harmon pointed at the door. Escort her to the gate. Process her out. If she resists, detain her. This is the moment where anyone watching from the outside would say it was over. That she'd miscalculated. That the badge was gone and the clock was against her. And a colonel had just formally ordered her removal, and she was alone in a cinderblock room with 2 military police officers and a captain who looked deeply uncomfortable. That was what this looked like from the outside, except she had not miscalculated. She had never miscalculated. And the watch on her wrist, which nobody in this room had thought to confiscate, showed 11:41. In 18 minutes, the second-tier notification would reach an office at the Pentagon that had a very short and very specific list of people who could order what happened next. She had set this in motion 3 months ago. She controlled her breathing. 4 in, hold 4. 4 out, hold 4. She stood. She walked to the door. She stepped through it. Briggs was still on the phone at 11:43 when the call waiting light on the duty desk began blinking with a priority code he had not seen outside of a training exercise in 6 years. He ended his call. He answered the priority line. He listened for 40 seconds without speaking. His face went through something that the young corporal at the next desk later described as the color draining from a wall. Slow. Then, all at once. Yes, sir, Briggs said. Understood, sir. I understand completely. He set the phone down with both hands. He looked across the room at nothing in particular. Then he stood up with the deliberateness of a man who understands that the next 10 minutes are going to matter for a very long time, and started toward the door at a pace that was technically not a run. At the main gate, she was signing a release form with a calm that the gate MP would later describe as supernatural. She had her pen halfway through the 3rd line when Briggs appeared. He did not speak immediately. He looked at her. His jaw was set. His hands were at his sides. He was breathing through his nose in the measured way of a man exercising significant control over himself. I'd be very careful, he said to the gate MP. To no one in particular. To everyone. About this one. The MP looked at him. The MP looked at her. She looked at Briggs. Something passed between them. Not a conversation. Not a signal. Recognition. The mutual recognition of two people who know the same classified things. "Stand by," Briggs said quietly. "Do not process her out." Then he turned and walked back toward the headquarters building, because there was a phone call he needed to intercept before it became a larger problem than it already was. The helicopter appeared at 11:59. Not one helicopter. Two. Black, unmarked. No tail numbers visible from the ground. Not standard transport. Command birds. The kind that did not land at Fort Bragg without a reason that would be in someone's file for the rest of their career. They came in low from the north, following the tree line, and set down on the main parade ground with a precision that turned heads across the installation. A line of Special Forces candidates who had been doing drill exercises stopped and watched and did not go back to their exercises. 4 people stepped off the first aircraft. Service dress uniforms. Full decorations. A Navy Vice Admiral, 2 Army Major Generals, and a woman from the Defense Intelligence Agency whose identification, when she produced it, had a classification level that made the receiving officer step back involuntarily. They walked toward the headquarters building without breaking stride. The word deliberate did not cover it. They moved like people who had arrived because a protocol had told them to arrive, and they intended to find out exactly what had triggered it. The second helicopter stayed on the ground with its rotors at idle. Waiting, Harmon met them in the hallway outside his own office. He had the file. He had the credential logs. He was prepared. He had the look of a man who had made a defensible decision according to his own authority and was ready to defend it. He got as far as I initiated a standard credential review under AR 380 before the DIA woman produced a document from a hard-sided case and laid it on the table in the hallway. The document was 8 pages. The first page was stamped classified red above theater-level clearance. Harmon looked at it. The Vice Admiral's voice was quiet. "She's been on your installation since 0430 this morning, conducting an authorized classified assessment. Her authorization was transmitted to this command at 1800 hours yesterday through secure channels. I received no. Your J2 received it. Your J2 was instructed to brief you at 0700. The Admiral's voice had not raised. It was the kind of quiet that made a room feel smaller. "We'll have that conversation separately." Harmon's face cycled through several things. Surprise was first. Then something that tried to be composure and didn't quite make it. Then something that looked, for just a heartbeat, like genuine fear. "Where is she now?" "Main gate," Briggs said from the doorway. He had arrived quietly. Waiting. They walked her back from the gate with Briggs beside her and the Vice Admiral's aide 1 step behind. The parade ground was still. The formation of candidates had not moved. The instructors with their clipboards had not moved. 43 people standing in the morning sun, watching. The DIA officer reached into the hard case and produced a second document, smaller. A single page in a clear sleeve. She handed it without comment to the Major General on the left. He looked at it. His hand made an involuntary movement, started to reach for his sidearm, stopped, completed the gesture as a flat press against his thigh. Something in his expression locked. He said, very quietly, "Viper." Not a name. A call sign. The word left his mouth and arrived in the air like a detonator pin pulled and laid gently on a table. The room detonated. One of the instructors made a sound, not a word, just a sound. A clipboard hit the ground. The clatter of it echoed across the parade ground like a gunshot in the held breath that followed. Someone at the far edge of the formation said what in a voice barely above a whisper, and the word carried because everything else had gone completely silent. The AC unit on the side of the armory building suddenly seemed deafening. A boot scuffed tile. Someone's radio hissed static and was immediately silenced. Viper was a call sign that had not appeared in an unclassified document in 11 years. It was attached to a record that most people in this building did not have the clearance to read. The people who did have that clearance had understood, for 7 of those 11 years, that the person attached to that call sign was officially listed as dead. Killed in a classified operation in eastern Syria. No remains recovered. No memorial. A blank space in the record where a name had been. She was standing in the morning sunlight in a plain ACU blouse with no rank insignia. Her left arm had caught the light, and on the forearm, 4 inches above the wrist where the sleeve had ridden up during the walk from the gate, was a tattoo. Not decorative. Not personal, precise. A classified heraldic insignia in black ink. A design that read as abstract geometry to anyone who lacked the context to decode it. To Major General Torres, it was something else entirely. He had seen that mark once before, on a citation that had been printed and classified on the same day, attached to an operation that did not officially exist. Assigned to a person who was then officially listed as dead. His hand moved involuntarily. A tremor, brief, controlled immediately, and he pressed it flat against his thigh. Who else is watching this and thinking about every time someone looked at her and saw exactly what she allowed them to see, and nothing more? The Vice Admiral raised his hand. The salute came up slowly, precisely, with the full formal weight of his rank behind it. 3 stars. 31 years. The kind of salute that carries the memory of every flag it has ever accompanied. He held it without rushing. Every degree of that angle was deliberate. Major General Torres raised his hand. Crisp, immediate. His jaw was set. Major General Park, half a second behind, came up just as sharp. The DIA officer, civilian, no obligation to salute, put her right hand flat over her heart. Not a gesture. A statement. The statement of someone who had read the complete file and decided a salute was insufficient. Briggs raised his hand. Not the fast salute of obligation, the quick professional upstroke of a man completing a duty, the slow one. The kind a man gives when he means every degree of the angle, when he has been waiting for the moment to arrive and is not going to waste it by rushing. 61 years old, 9 months from retirement, 33 years that had taken him from a motor pool in Germany to the worst streets in Fallujah to a doorway at Fort Bragg, where he had watched a woman's hands and known. He gave her a salute like a man paying a debt he hadn't known he was carrying. His eyes were very bright. He was not embarrassed by that. The candidates in formation went up. All of them. Without being ordered. Without a word from any instructor. It propagated through them like electricity through standing water. One to the next to the next. 43 people coming to attention in the morning sun because the moment demanded it, and they understood the demand without needing it explained. Harmon did not move. Major General Torres looked at him. Said nothing. Just looked at him with the particular expression of a man who has spent a career learning when to speak and when silence is the more accurate instrument. Harmon's hand came up. Slowly, the way a man's hand moves when every nerve in his body is working against it. He completed the salute. He held it. He looked at her. She looked back at him with an expression that contained nothing theatrical. Not satisfaction, not anger, not contempt, not vindication. It was the expression of someone who has already moved on to the next phase and is simply waiting, with absolute patience, for this part to close. The Vice Admiral spoke clearly, for the record, for the 43 people in formation, for the 2 MPs, and the captain, and the gate sergeant, and everyone who would be writing incident reports about this morning for the remainder of their careers. Commander Nora Vance. Classified designation Viper. Tier 1 Special Operations. Currently active. Her authority on this installation supersedes installation command. Every person present, including myself, operates under her authorization in the conduct of her current mission. He lowered his hand. Colonel Harmon, you are relieved pending a formal inquiry into the events of this morning. Captain Delgado, you will return Commander Vance's credentials immediately. Delgado produced the badge from his pocket. He held it out. She took it without looking at him. She clipped it back to her collar. She looked at her watch. 12:03, Harmon's eyes moved to Briggs. Briggs was looking straight ahead, and there was nothing in his expression that offered anything. The arrests, 2 of them, Harmon and a major on his staff whose communications had been under investigation for 6 weeks, happened without drama. 2 agents from the 2nd helicopter. Quiet words. Harmon did not resist. He seemed, in the end, smaller than his uniform. The kind of man who has only ever been as large as the authority he was given and has no resources for the moment when that authority is removed. She watched it happen. Then, she looked away. By 1400, the parade ground had returned to its ordinary rhythms. Candidates running the course. Instructors with clipboards. The helicopters had gone. The documents had gone into hard cases. The agents had driven off the installation with 2 men in flex cuffs and a vehicle with federal plates. The day had absorbed the morning and moved on. She was at the portable field table by the armory again. The M110 was disassembled in front of her in the clean afternoon light. She picked up the bolt carrier group. She rotated it with both hands, wrists at the correct angle, fingers spaced the way 11 years of specific and classified training had placed them. Briggs came and stood nearby. Not close. Nearby, they mocked her rank. They forgot she outranked everything they'd ever built their careers on. I looked up what I could, he said. Not an apology, not a question, just a statement. I know you did. 11 years is a long time. Yes, he was quiet for a moment. The unit that was killed in Syria. 4 operators, 4 she did not look up. Were they yours? They were mine. He nodded. There was nothing else to say about it. He had 33 years of understanding exactly how much nothing else there was to say about some things. Harmon was selling intelligence, she said. Has been for 2 years. We needed him to make a mistake that was on the record and witnessed. He needed to feel like he had the authority to make it. She picked up the barrel assembly. He did. The major? Communications intercept. His too. Anyone else on the list? She was quiet for a moment. The kind of quiet that answers the question. How many? There's a surveillance image, she said. Rooftop in Damascus. 2 years before the operation. Someone was there who had no business being there. Someone with access to the mission parameters. She set the barrel down precisely. I don't have a name yet. I have a face. She controlled her breathing. 4 in, hold 4. 4 out, hold 4. I'll have a name. Briggs looked at the table, at the disassembled rifle, at the hands of a woman who had been officially dead for 11 years and had spent every one of those years hunting the people who made it necessary. You need anything from this installation? He asked. I have what I came for. He nodded. He looked at the sky, late afternoon, the sun lowering, the kind of pale gold that makes a military installation look briefly beautiful before it returns to concrete and function. He looked at her one more time with the expression of a man making a conscious choice to remember something. Then he went back inside. She worked until 1700. She repacked her equipment with the same deliberateness with which she had set it up. She signed the armory log in a name no one would recognize. She walked to the gate, showed her badge, passed through. Her watch read 1702. The sky was going amber at the edges. Tomorrow's debrief would take 3 hours. Tomorrow's secure communication would carry the Damascus image to 4 analysts who would have 48 hours to run it through every database she could access. Somewhere, a man whose face she knew and whose name she didn't had, 11 years of borrowed time running out. Justice isn't loud. It's patient. She walked to the vehicle. She did not look back. One name left on the list, one face in a surveillance image, blurred and far away, a rooftop in Damascus, and a figure looking down at a convoy that would not survive the morning. One person who still didn't know she was alive. Tomorrow brings new ghosts to hunt. Every soldier carries a story that few ever hear. Listen with your heart. Thank you for staying and watching. Subscribe to MVP Stories for more.